Welcome to Answers Unleashed, a talk show to help you reshape your brain with science and faith to find the answers around you and in front of you. Well, today we have a great guest here on the show. Now, you've all seen it. We've been watching the TV. We've been looking at what's happening on social media. We've been seeing people divided over political reasons. We've seen people that are disagreeing with one another, are thinking one way is right, thinking one way is wrong, and we are separating ourselves. But there is a way to actually come together again in a way that respects all of us in what we bring to this nation. So today, I have a great guest with me here. He is pastor, or I should say Reverend Dr. Drew Sams, the lead head pastor at Bel Air Presbyterian Church here in Los Angeles. Is one of the largest Presbyterian churches in the nation. And he is here today. He's going to tell us a little bit about what we can do as a nation together. No matter what our religious affiliation, no matter what our background is, how we can come together in a way where we can respect each other using practical tools of community. So today, please welcome Dr. Drew Sams. Thank you.
Olympia, it's so great to be here. What an honor to join the show today.
Thank you. Well, I'm just so impressed with your background. You have been a part of Bel Air Church now for a couple of years, and you lead one of the largest churches in Los Angeles and one of the largest churches in the nation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's humbling. It's especially humbling considering I grew up in Los Angeles. And when I was younger, as I went to college at the University of Southern California, I went there because I didn't get into UCLA, so it was truly my university of second choice. But while I was at USC, I started attending Bel Air Presbyterian Church. And this is before I became a Christian. So I'm checking out this church, and I'm getting to know the people there. And little did I know that 16 years later, I would find myself now the senior pastor of that church, having gone and gotten my master's of divinity, gotten my doctorate, and now here on the show with you. 16 years later, never would I have guessed that would have happened.
I'm excited because I've been following you for years. I love your sermons. And what really brings home the fact in each sermon is the ability of taking the responsibility on ourselves and creating the change that we wish to see in the world. And it's something in which Gandhi has always talked about, and it's something that you bring home in your services, in your sermons. You have one of the largest churches, and you see people of all different backgrounds coming together. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, what I love about our church, Bel Air Presbyterian, is that we do have such a diversity of people that come. You know, you hear the city at the beginning of that name, Bel Air, and maybe in your mind you create an image of what that person looks like, but it's actually not at all true when you show up on campus. You have people that come in from all over Los Angeles, people who come in via bus and then walk the rest of the way, people who drive up in their nice cars. We have people who ride their bike to church, and across the whole socioeconomic spectrum, and from a variety of ethnic backgrounds. It's interesting. We have a huge growing population of Farsi-speaking individuals right now at the church, and so I love the imagery. It's not a melting pot, because a melting pot, in a sense, you kind of lose the distinctiveness in a pot of soup, you know? It's more like this gorgeous salad where you can see the distinct differences, and it all comes together to have this beautiful experience of community at Bel Air. I love it. It's been such a joy to be part of.
It is beautiful campus as well. There is a church aspect to this world, and especially to Bel Air Presbyterian. And what I really like about what you have been doing with the church is that you are showing that how we are a community, how we can be certain ways with everyone, every situation. Explain that a little bit more so we all can understand that philosophy.
Well, in my experience of life, and really that's all I can speak from is my own experience. You know, in our modern world, especially in Los Angeles, we are in some ways more fragmented, we're more hurried, we're more dislocated than we've ever been before. We've lost the true experience of community in so many ways that many other countries still experience, other places around the world still experience, or throughout history we have experienced, but because of not only the use of technology, but just inventions that enable us to live so far from where we work and so far from our extended families. There's this sense of, on one hand, the beauty of technology, that we can have relationships. I've got family back east. I've got family in Texas, my wife's side of the family. So the fact that I can know, even this morning, what my nephew, who just turned 12 yesterday, what he got for his birthday, and I could reach out to him. I've lost a sense of that connectedness that so many people have had for all of human history. And so really my heart and our desire as a church is that in this hurried world, as people are more and more disconnected, that we would be able to create a space, a physical space that we would fill as individuals, that we would come together and to truly be the type of community that we really need and that we long for. One that where we show up saying, what can I give to this community, not just what can I get out of it. And when you have that mindset change, not just what can I get out of it, but what can I give to it, it's almost like the difference between approaching church or a community, whatever it is, whether you're part of a school or a group of friends. You can either approach it one of two ways. You either approach it like a vending machine, or you approach it like a refrigerator.
Like a refrigerator.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Everybody knows vending machine, refrigerator. In some ways they look similar, big appliances, big, tall, square, oblong things, right? A vending machine, you put a little bit in just to get out what you want. And it's great, but if it ever breaks, if it ever runs out of what you need, that's somebody else's responsibility to take care of. You're not going to stock it. You're not going to fix it. It's up to somebody else. And I think sometimes we can approach community, even our family or our friends that way, where I'm going to put a little bit in, but really it's because I want to get something out of it.
We can get out of it.
Yeah, that's more the focus. But if something's not there or something's wrong, it's easier to move on to a different set of friends. It's much harder to do the hard work of helping make the change. You quoted Gandhi earlier, to be the change that you want to see in the world. That's the refrigerator model. The
refrigerator model is being the change.
Yes, and it's this idea of you still get so much out of a refrigerator, but you've got to stock the fridge. If a light goes out, it's your responsibility to replace it. If you don't know how to replace it, you call somebody to help replace it. But in a sense, you are responsible for stocking it for the flourishing not only of your family, but any guests that you might have coming over to the house. So I love that idea of approaching community like a refrigerator.
Like a refrigerator, nourishing, something that's always going to give you something in the way that's going to always be restocked. So let's go with that idea. I love that refrigerator idea. And there's things that hamper the refrigerator's operation. The electricity can go out.
Absolutely.
There's things like that. So let's look at it in the big sense. We saw the election. We saw how divided communities were. We saw different ethnic communities divided between who they were going to vote for in the election. We saw the church divided on who they were going to vote for in the election. And something that I really enjoyed is right after elections, you said something in one of your sermons. It was, all right, don't defriend people on Facebook just so they have a different view of yours. You have to remember that we are a part of a larger nation. A larger nation in the sense of that community where we have to realize our differences is what makes us stronger.
And it takes so much work to sit down with somebody across a meal, across a cup of coffee that you disagree with. And it's almost as if we've become, not everyone, but it seems to be that we've become more and more a society and a culture that, well, if you disagree with me, we don't need to continue this conversation. We don't need to continue this friendship or this meal. I'm just going to move on to people like me. And I think that's one of the most debilitating ways of seeing the world, is just looking for people to spend time with who are like me. Mm. One of my favorite words, I study Greek and Hebrew in order to be able to understand the original languages of Scripture. And the Greek word for hospitality, I love this word.
What is it?
It's Xenophilia.
Xenophilia.
Yes.
Xenophilia.
Xenophilia, great, a lot of syllables there, Xenophilia. So everybody knows Philadelphia, the great city, the city of brotherly love. And that's the Greek word for the love of a brother. Xenophilia, you hear that philia right there, that's love. Xeno is stranger.
Ah, love of a stranger.
Love of a stranger.
Oh.
The word hospitality literally means to love the stranger
wow.
in your midst, to love somebody completely unlike you.
Wow, that's very deep. And often we experience fear. And in my TED Talk, Reprogramming Your Brain to Overcome Fear, I talk about how fear debilitates us. And sometimes fear, because we don't know of a particular background about someone or we have never been exposed to that, that may separate us and cause that loss of hospitality and that loss of getting to know that stranger. And that's sometimes, well, how can I say that? It cuts off the circulation of love.
Oh, that's such a great way to say it, because we've seen the word xenophobia all throughout this election cycle. And we don't yet know as a society the word xenophilia. Xenophobia has become this word, fear of the other, fear of the stranger. And we need to understand the opposite of it, or else, to your point, it gets cut off, it gets strangled. So xenophilia, the love of the stranger. So, think about how different your life would look like, or even your day, if, as you go to the grocery store, as you run your errands, as you go to work, if you're intentionally looking for people who are not like you, or strangers, and intentionally loving them, caring for them, opening the door for them, carrying the groceries for them, buying them a cup of coffee. It's such a different way of viewing the world. And that's strangers. But what if we could bring that into even our closest relationships? How beautiful that would be.
So when someone has difficulty or they feel uncomfortable discussing things that they don't agree with, and they literally have physical reactions, they feel uncomfortable, they don't want to sit there, they'll start breathing a certain way because they're feeling uncomfortable. What mental tip? Because I know your background in psychology, and I love that aspect about not only the psychology, but with the biblical knowledge that you have and you bring to the table. In the merging of the two, what do you recommend for someone in that case to feel more comfortable within themselves as they are learning about someone new or different that they do not know or they don't have any information about yet?
One of the techniques that I use, and I try to visualize this, so let's say you're sitting down at a table with somebody, and imagine you're having a cup of coffee, and you're having a conversation, and things are great, but all of a sudden it gets onto a topic that maybe you can start to feel, the anxiety.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's almost like your blood is boiling, or you start to, how on earth am I going to, share what I believe, because it's so different, And what I try to do is I try to imagine my belief or my point of view as something that is sitting out in front of me at the table. And when they share their point of view, their belief, that it's something that is sitting out on the table in front of us. And on one hand, it's connected to me because it's my view. It's connected to them. It's their point of view. But if I'm able to, in a sense, put it out on the table, then I don't take things as personally when they attack that thing, because I'm reminded, and this is from my faith background, Scripture tells me that my identity, who I am, is actually so much deeper and so much more foundational than even just my point of view or my reputation or the degrees I have, or the titles I have, or my accomplishments, but my identity is actually rooted much, much deeper than that. Those might be true things about me, but it's not the truest thing about me. So if somebody disagrees over, a particular view on how to care for people who are going through addiction, for example, and there might be two huge ideas, and maybe I'm sensitive to it because I have family who have died of drug addictions. Maybe I take that really personally, their view, if they're flippant. I try to put it out on the table in front of me and interact with it in a way that is a little more removed from the core of my identity. What that does is it helps remind me that we're not attacking each other. We're not arguing each other's identity, but we're having a conversation around these viewpoints, and I've found that it lowers my anxiety. My heart rate begins to slow down. I can begin to make sense of my thoughts. And as small a tip that is, I found it to be really, really helpful.
So in that case, if we literally remove it from us and put it on the table and imagine it as being an entity on its own, that is not a part of us, but something that
I would say it's still connected to us
still
because,
connected to us?
of course, because what we believe is so core to who we are. But what that does for me is it reminds me that it's not all of who I am.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's a part of who I am, but it's not. Maybe that's a better way to say it. It's not all of who I am. So rather than me sitting on the opposite side of the table of someone and we're going at each other, what we're doing is that we are two human beings that are deeply present with one another. And these beliefs that we have are part of who we are, but it's not the fullness of who we are. And so therefore we can engage in this dialogue that is mutually respectful, that actually desires to learn before we teach. And that's the biggest thing,
I think that's the biggest thing for all of us, because so often we are facing situations in which we are in a situation, someone has different viewpoints, different ideas, and we sometimes have to step back and we realize, all right, they're not attacking me. They're just trying to show their viewpoint. And it's so fascinating. And this is our brain tip for today. On the Answers Unleashed show, we always have a little brain tip. And so this is what I recognize. All of us, every single one of us, has gone through some sort of struggle. We are all alike. Just our struggles may be different. And there's no struggle that is better or worse, because we are all humans. We are all going through different struggles. If you are alive, you have something that you're trying to figure out, something that you're trying to solve, something that you're trying to understand. And it's your job to learn from the people that you're around, because more than likely they're pointing you towards the answer. Whether or not their experiences are completely different, they have something that they're offering. So when we understand, when we look at individuals as being a resource of being able to bring guidance and light, no matter where they've come from, we then are entering a perception and understanding of being able to see where our answers are. And I so enjoy, Pastor Drew, you talk about how sometimes we can be separated. And even the church had separation within its philosophies during the election. I know the Catholic Pope said, "Oh, what's happening with the American church if they've disenfranchised Latinos and disenfranchised African Americans? And this is just a disgrace." But not all the church is like that. Not all churches like that, and the Bel Air Presbyterian is one of the churches out of many who are incorporating and making sure people of all backgrounds are being incorporated. And you even went to Washington, D.C. recently to talk about how to completely embrace communities across the nation. Want to tell us more about that?
Yes, and that group that I'm a part of, actually, just as a quick little background, the Lilly Foundation gave a grant to Pepperdine University, and they created a leadership program for early career pastors. So there's 12 of us, all throughout Los Angeles. It's a mixture of men and women, Latino, African American, Korean American, Japanese American, and Caucasian. And what we have in common is, on one hand, a deep love for Christ and wanting to share the love of Christ to our city through our churches, but we're all within our first 10 years of ministry. And so we've met every quarter of these last 2 years talking about different topics, really trying to engage civic leaders on the topics of homelessness.
Homelessness, that's big here in Los Angeles, especially.
Huge. Yes, right now 4.5 million in Los Angeles are living in poverty. 25% of LA report no access to social or emotional support. 50% are living below the poverty level in Los Angeles.
That's Los Angeles alone.
That's in Los Angeles. And the first time in human history, actually, that there are more people living below the poverty line in the suburbs, not the cities. So even these dynamics, demographics, the cultural landscape changing, the fact that we could sit down and speak with different leaders here in Los Angeles around the topics of the criminal justice system, around sustainability, foster care system, all culminated in this trip to Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
So we spent an entire week there. While we were there, this group of pastors, now we've bonded. We've spent 2 years together.
2 years. This is like your family.
It
This
is.
is like your miniature little leadership family.
It is, and the beauty of it is that each of these individuals comes from such a different background. Some pastors, pastor in Compton here in Los Angeles. One is in Malibu. For those who know Southern California, those are two very different places to lead and to live.
Strong social economical differences
Very
in those
different,
areas.
yeah. And so the fact that we have people who are very conservative politically across the spectrum to very liberal politically, and we all traveled to D.C. together. There were, on one hand, heated moments. This is right before the election, at the end of the summer, right in the midst of some very significant events throughout the nation, of tragic deaths, brutal actions done by the police, a variety of things. So here we are, we're coming together in this very diverse community, desiring to learn from one another. And the fact that we were willing to work through some of those conversations, to go to the State Department, to meet Sean Casey. He's the U.S. Special Representative for Religion and Global Affairs. And he's telling us about the work that they're doing, helping refugees settling here in the United States and the role that the church can play. We met with Khalil Jashan, who's the executive director of the Arab Center in Washington, D.C. We met with such a variety of people. And what it reminded me, in that little microcosm of an experience, is true, I think, for all of our lives, that the more we can surround ourselves with people that have a different point of view and to sit down and actually desire to learn from them, to treat them like a refrigerator and say, I'm going to stock this relationship. I'm going to invest in this relationship. I'm not going to walk away from it. I'm not going to run from it. The more I've learned, the more patient I've become, the more slow to speak I've become, to mouth off my opinion, but really to desire to understand, where's this coming from? Help me understand. And the beauty of that experience is really spilling over in other relationships in my life.
I know that is definitely true. There's so many people that follow you online. People can follow you in several different places, and they all have the same idea afterwards. It's like they're inspired because they realize what they can do specifically to change their world, to see the answers that are in front of them specifically. And I thank you so much for what you are doing. I just have one key question for you. When you are out in Washington, D.C., and you are out at all the monuments around you, what is the one thing that you were so surprised to learn for yourself and that you want the world to know?
There was a moment, I'll forever remember it. I was in front of the Lincoln Memorial late at night, standing at the exact spot where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech, looking out across the great reflecting pond at the Washington Monument across the way. And I'm standing next to Anthony Powell, African-American pastor here in Los Angeles, and we started talking, and we sat down. Here we are, we're in this historic space, desiring to learn from each other. And I'm asking Anthony, help me understand how you see the world. And he's asking me, Drew, help me understand how you see the world. And it was such a beautiful moment that I'll never forget. And it takes me all the way back to my childhood when my mom, one of the things I remember her saying was, Drew, you can learn something from everyone you meet. And that's one of the wisest things she ever taught me, that no matter who I meet in life, that there's something I can learn from. So different than there's something I can teach something to, And that was such a great reminder of how much I learned from Anthony in that spot. And it wants me to be a lifelong learner in so many areas of my life.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being the change that you wish to see in the world. And thank you for allowing us to learn from you. Well, there you have it. Thank you so much, Dr. Drew Sams. If you find him, how can people find you?
Well, I'm on all social networks at Surfer Drew. I've grown up surfing, You can find me there on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. But if you go on iTunes and you look up either Drew Sams or Bel Air Church, you can listen to any of our messages that we give every week on a Sunday.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us on Answers Unleashed.
Honor to be on the show. Honor to be on it.
I'm just so happy that you're here. For more information and more shows, tune in to us. You're welcome to go to AnswersUnleashed.com. Check out this podcast. It's going to be up in a couple of days, as well as you can check out our past podcasts. You're welcome to call us at 888-88-ANSWERS with any question that you have. We may be able to answer it on the air in the coming weeks. And for always, come to us, kpcradio.com. Listen to all the other shows here that we have at the campus. And once again, I am here with you, helping you reshape your brain with science and faith to find the answers in front of you. This is Answers Unleashed. I am Olympia LePoint. I'll see you next time.